What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. We've officially wrapped up OTAs and mandatory minicamp, and I want to take a look back at everything we've been able to surmise so far between practice reps and short snippets that have been posted, all of the news that's been coming out and the tweets and everything, and then what any of us personally have been able to see that I have had a chance to review myself, and give an update on what it looks like the rookie class is looking like, and then some of our best and worst performers coming out of OTAs and minicamp. So let's dive into the rookie class first, and we'll go in order of our picks. Our round one rookie, Fashanu. Robert Saleh just came off mentioning he's as advertised. He looks very smooth, efficient, technically refined as a pass blocker. The run game is where we know that we needed a lot of work, and it's hard to really figure out who's doing well in that facet when the offensive linemen are at a disadvantage. Not really running a ton of run game reps per se. Definitely seems like the atmosphere that was set up was focusing a ton on the passing game. And then, of course, some variations and stuff that we heard about what the defense was doing. But we know that he's been in Tyron Smith's pocket. He's as advertised, and the only small concern that was out there, which we'll talk about another one of the standouts a little bit later, was him losing a couple of reps here and there. But it's the by nature of how these things operate, you expect certain positions to be at a disadvantage, so it comes with the territory. But the good news is he doesn't look like a fish out of water if he had to start day one, and right now he's just really being able to take advantage of picking up a lot of those additional reps that a guy like Tyron Smith will have the opportunity to forfeit, which is what we're doing in terms of his rehab schedule. Then we jump down to our third round guy, Malachi Corley, our weapon. He's classified himself and Garrett Wilson as, I forget what the nickname that I heard around them was. It's like, this is probably way off. Boom and bang or something like that. I can look it up later. Nonetheless, though, Malachi Corley's situation is slightly different. Those that will have wanted to have seen him stand out more will be a little bit disappointed with him, right? Most of the conversation around him during OTAs has been that you see the physical presence, you feel it in his game. Obviously, the route running ability is still going to be a huge focal point for him with this development, but we did get Aaron Rodgers calling him his favorite weapon in the draft. We know that with him having some nicks and bruises that came up, that also ate into some of his time to be able to go out there, but he hasn't stood out in any particular way, and that's not necessarily a detraction from what he can offer, what he can be in year one. But realistically, I would say don't look at him as maybe the primary number 3 at this point in time in the receiver room. He's definitely going to have to work his way up. I would probably say you can comfortably put him anywhere between the 4th and 5th weapon in that wide receiver room right now, but we'll see how he continues to build. He's going to get healthy in these next 40 or so days that we have off, come back for training camp, and then we'll see the physical contact. Hopefully he can find a few days to shine at that point. Then we get into our day 3 guys. We're looking at running back Braelon Allen. He has stood out tremendously, right? Not only have we seen in certain situations his ability to go out there and be able to bang with some of those guys on the defensive line when it comes to being a pass blocker, but really a lot of people have highlighted his ability in the receiving game, not just as a check down option, but also a little bit of his underrated ability to be able to go out there and win some reps when he's actually running routes. And it's been impressive. Outside of that, just his normal job as a running back to go out there, hit the hole, grind out yards, get things done. The best compliment you can get is that he's been decisive, hitting the hole. Both him and the other running back, and we'll get into him in a moment, they've both been known to have a no-nonsense approach, which is what I've seen consistently for news coming out. So he is actually performing above advertised, if you ask me, because you'd expect a certain level of performance from him in the run game. But it seems like he's a clear running back, too, in this rotation right now, based on Breece Hall being able to sit out with some injuries of his own and all the additional time he's probably been the primary guy that's gotten a lot of those first string reps. So I'm really happy about this because I still prefer Isaiah Davis a little bit more right now if the season needed to start. But I wouldn't be surprised if Braelon Allen can outwork him just with the more natural talent, physical ability that he has, and just what he can bring to an NFL offense by virtue of his actual size. And you know, demeanor and things like that can change for him. So I'm really excited that he's actually had a plus OTAs and minicamp. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that parlays itself in training camp once the pads get on. Our QB of the future, ideally in Jordan Travis, he's essentially nondescript here, right? He's still working through his rehabilitation. The plan ideally would be that he's going to be able to suit up once training camp rolls around, but we haven't had any kind of updated timelines that we're aware of in terms of where he's at in his rehab process. Will he officially be out there for training camp, or is he truly essentially going to end up getting a redshirt year? So he hasn't been able to participate in any reps whatsoever really for us to speak about. When we get into one of my other guys though, Isaiah Davis, our other running back, again, I liked him after being able to break down both of these guys a lot, just because he understands what he is and what he can do, and whether that works for 58 minutes out of a hour-long game or not, at some point he's going to catch you slipping as a defense, and he's going to continue to punish you over the course of a full game. And his superpower over the course of these OTAs has been his pass blocking ability, and it was a little bit unknown with both of these guys because they weren't asked to do it a ton in just how they were expected to be implemented in their offenses. But he's shown the ability to go out there and stonewall some guys. He's also been an underrated option in the passing game from what I understand. And same thing, to me, again, if you're just talking about the running ability, Isaiah Davis is the guy that'll probably get it done more consistently than you'll get out of a guy like Braelon Allen. But I think with both of these guys, you're playing with house money here. It's maybe a luxury pick, if you will, but you're setting yourselves up very well for the future to be able to keep a consistent power back caliber player in your backfield in case one of the two guys ends up dealing with some prolonged injuries or anything of that sort. So another rookie that's had a plus offseason with us so far. And then you get into my favorite player of the draft, not named Olu, and tezStiggers, our cornerback, potentially cornerback of the future when you want to talk about a DJ Reed replacement. And we just got, his press conference where he mentioned not necessarily being concerned about free agency, but kind of loving to be back if that's in the cards for us. But tezStiggers has probably been quietly one of the top 3 best players coming out of OTAs and minicamp, and he just actually ended up finishing up a practice where he was able to go out there and pick off quarterback Peasley, and I think he ran it back to the house. If not, he got pretty far, but he has also been as advertised, a guy that, although it's a different setting coming from the CFL, he's been a ball hawk. He's arguably been one of the better DBs in general when it comes to coverage ability, man or zone, not named Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, or Michael Carter II. So I'm loving the fact that he's had himself a very, very strong season. If we didn't have one of the best offseason, if we didn't have one of the best cornerback trios in the NFL right now, I would say that you're talking about Stiggers potentially being, in that top 3 rotation. Again, it's going to be a huge uphill climb, but I think you can see him jump Brandon Echols as part of keeping 5 guys in that cornerback room. And I wouldn't be surprised if they find a way to spell DJ Reed or Michael Carter II when it makes sense to get his ball hawk talents out there. So another guy I'm really, really excited for to see in training camp, because ideally you're going to see him. He already was able to earn himself some first-string reps. And ideally, you see them play with that a little bit more to kind of figure out, do they want to put him in dime, nickel packages, et cetera, et cetera. So really, really hyped for him. And then when it comes to Jaylen Key, we didn't hear much, right? I think in general, the coaches love the ability that he brings as a guy that was the Mr. Irrelevant pick. You see somewhat of that plus athleticism. You love the frame that he's building, but there's a lot of mental processing that needs to be done. and a lot of physical restrictions in some key areas of his skill set that'll hold him back. So he feels like he's destined to be a practice squad guy for us. But hopefully he can find a way to go out there and make some plays that makes it worth having him on the practice squad and not just being a guy that we place on there because we utilize draft resources for. But keep an eye out for him because it's not like he's completely devoid of talent to be able to go out there and make something shake. So that gets that's the full rundown of our draft class in terms of any of the news that I can give you guys that I picked up on after keeping tabs from OTAs. When we get into some of the top performers, though, the list is lengthy enough, right? I think once you start talking about having anything more than like 3 or 4 guys, and you've had yourself a pretty extraordinary offseason. So Xavier Gipson is going to top this list right now. If you had to highlight this and just make this a video of his own, Xavier Gipson has been talked about as being the second best wide receiver throughout the entire offseason so far. And, take it with a grain of salt, right? We haven't had Mike Williams out there. It's not like we have the deepest wide receiver, core in the NFL. So you're talking about him outperforming the rookie Malachi Corley, who's still a day 2 pick, but then you're talking about him outperforming Allen Lazard, former UDFA, if I'm remembering correctly, but still we've seen him work his way up in Rodgers' offenses all the way up to being wide receiver 1. And then you're talking about guys that are growing up around him with, Irvin Charles and Jason Brownlee. But considering he didn't have much of a solid, even above average receiving skill set last year, he seems like he's making a ton of strides, specifically in his route running and his ability to utilize his speed as part of his route running. So you talk about, stop and go, double moves, different things like that. But he's been all over the field. He's been one of the primary guys when it comes to that yak ability on the field for us. So maybe he'll look to take that Yak King title in the NFL away from Malachi Corley, or at least battle for that title on the New York Jets roster anyways. But he has been a big play ability threat so far throughout the course of the offseason. And he's done it against a number of guys. I think it's all come pretty much from the slot from what I've seen, but a lot of the stuff off play action and then a lot of being able to create on his own, just part of his route running. So really impressed with him, hoping he keeps it up as well. Then you get into Garrett Wilson, obviously our best guy, arguably on offense, not named Breece Hall. And he looks like he's achieving that next level, right? He's a guy that's essentially unmatchable with the DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner from everything I've seen from clips and stuff. They've done a tremendous job still being there, but between Aaron Rodgers and his precision passing and Garrett Wilson and just his nimbleness, his shiftiness, his ability to just make things happen, the biggest thing to me that stands out is it seems like he's been able to polish off that deep or unlock, I should say, the deep passing for him, which we've seen we've seen him have plenty shots for over the last 2 years with the combination of 7 or so plus quarterbacks, but between accuracy and then maybe just pressing and picking up some injuries along the way, that never was a consistent piece of his game. I think this can be unlocked this year with Aaron Rodgers, and even, worst case scenario, knock on wood, we get down to a Tyrod Taylor. We've seen him have some pretty effective deep passing ability as well. So I think this is the year that, you talk about him being one of those higher echelon top 5 type guys, undisputably moving forward. Then let's talk about some of the other guys. We'll shoot this off real quick. Kenny Yeboah in the tight end room. He's probably had one of the best performances. Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Ruckert, not to say they've been bad or mediocre or anything. They've been consistent. They performed as you expect. Jeremy Ruckert's even continuing to progress. But Kenny Yeboah is the guy that I would say is impressing the most. He's already been really, really good as a blocker. But now you're talking about him being able to go out there and make huge plays in the passing game, just from what we've seen. Aaron Rodgers threading the needle to him over the middle. Him just kind of feeling like he's a actual player that you can somewhat game plan around as, a third or fourth option in the offense whenever he's out there on the field. So I'm happy about where he's been. He seems like he could maybe be a long-term piece within our offense for, a couple of years without it having to be a ridiculous contract. So great find, great development for him. Joe Tippmann, obviously he's talking about a completely different line kind of being centered around him. Plenty of veteran talents, but he's talking about, all-pro, Pro Bowl, Hall of Fame caliber talents all around him, and he's the guy that's expected to take that leadership role to galvanize everything. And everybody's spoken highly, from Aaron Rodgers to his line mates, about his ability to go out there and do so. And we know what his athleticism and skill set allows him to do within his offense. So we may be looking at our next, Kevin Mawai, Nick Mangold type guy here. Then Tyron Smith speaks for himself. He's been out there looking like, a top left tackle in the league. And you consider that he's going up against the likes of Will McDonald and his freaky athletic traits, and then switching off to guys like a Jermaine Johnson with his powerful, power profile and different things of that nature. So the fact that he's seen it all, done it all, and can handle it all is a huge plus on this offensive line. And it's one of those situations where if you're a quarterback at this point with Tyron Smith protecting your blind side, you 99% of the time aren't worried about anything happening on the left side of the field in terms of somebody getting the edge advantage against you, which is a huge plus. Eric Watts, the UDFA, he's probably been the best guy, which is a surprise because I thought Leonard Taylor may be a guy that flashed really, really early just with his former first-round prospects. But Eric Watts is the guy that's probably had the best performance on the defense, regardless of UDFA or already being on the roster per se, right? Obviously, I'm kind of excluding the Sauce Gardners and the DJ Reeds of the world, but for some of these first-year, second-year type players, Eric Watts has been great. I think, honestly, he's flashed more than anybody really considered. He's used and abused Carter Warren pretty consistently for a lot of the days that I've seen people highlight him as a name to watch. But he's essentially the go-to profile for what a guy like Saleh would look for. And the fact that he's responding so quickly to his coaching, I think, bodes well for his prospects of making the 53-man roster, potentially as a Michael Clemens replacement, maybe in addition to, but still, this seems like another gem that the Jets have been able to found and can make himself a strong presence in this rotation without necessarily needing to take over and be a guy, right? Tony Adams, another name that's been out there. He's continued to progress more so in his coverage ability. We've seen him come downhill and be able to lay some guys out, but also make some stops. And then we've seen him be able to keep things in front of him over the top while still snagging a takeaway here or two there. So I think you'll see him get extremely comfortable in a contract year for himself with Chuck Clark aside him and being able to lean into that leadership as well, and the communication improving between themselves and the cornerbacks and the linebackers that have been here pretty consistently. I think you're talking about a plus off season and hopefully a plus year for them. And then quietly, these guys almost never get named, but I had to. Our kicker, Greg the Leg. I don't recall, since I've seen people posting his stats, that he's missed any kicks this offseason. If so, maybe there was one or two, but literally every post I've seen has been he's went 5 of 5 today, 6 of 6 today. So the good news is this isn't wasted money with us re-signing him. He's still going to be able to go out there, and once we get within that 40-ish range, you're still talking about being able to rely on him if you don't want to get too risky with pressing on the offense. So really happy there. When we want to wrap up with talking about some of the worst performances, it's a pretty easy list for me. Allen Lazard leading the charge. He's a guy that you expected to be able to lean on, the Aaron Rodgers chemistry, just having that second year within the system. But he's been locked down, right? When you want to talk about just the optics of it, you're talking about qwan'tez Stiggers, who's essentially cornerback 5 right now. When he's gotten first-string reps or second-string reps and he's matching up against Allen Lazard in the red zone, mind you, where there's a huge physical mismatch, he's been locked up. He hasn't been able to make the plays. There's been some elements of butterfingers. He's had a strong day or two to kind of finish wrapping up our offseason here. But overall, he's down bad right now. He's on a downward spiral. So you hope take the 40 days, get into your bag, come back, and be ready. You know, one of the things that frustrated me, is frustrating to see that I've heard, is that at one point he pissed off Aaron Rodgers enough to make him slam his helmet, right? So this is one of those situations that bears watching. The New York Jets could do the unthinkable and find a way to take the hit for the $11 million or so that we're on the hook for with Allen Lazard, and he could be a cut candidate if things don't continue to go as expected with him turning things around. Then you get into Zack, the tight end, our perfect RAS score guy, right? Everybody has fallen in love with the athletic ability for him, but he hasn't necessarily seemed like he's been the development hasn't gone maybe as fast as everybody is expecting, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Coming out of Old Dominion, you can argue that he was still pretty raw in every aspect, which, you know, him being an older player as well was already kind of a little odd. But, you know, there's been slight improvements in blocking from what I've seen, but I've heard he still had a lot of balls touch the ground when he's been targeted. And so if he's going to make the field, for one, it's going to be via special teams, which means the blocking is going to need to be on point. And at this point, I don't know if we keep 4 tight ends to make room for him on the roster. So you're talking about another practice squad year. And hopefully this is a guy that I would love to see back on the practice squad, right? Just give him the second year. At that point, you can start making, you know, judgment calls that this just isn't going to be the place he succeeds in, if ever. But still, he has a lot of traits to mold around. It's not like he hasn't improved in anything from my understanding this offseason. But seeing that Kenny Yeboah is clearly ahead of him is definitely a sign of where he's at right now. So talking about Carter Warren, we mentioned it. You know, you can't be beat. You can't get beaten consistently by a UDFA over the course of the offseason, even with you being at a disadvantage. You know, Eric Watts, for one, is a guy that has picked up a sack, it feels like, almost every day, or multiple sacks every other day, and Carter Warren has been on the receiving end of a ton of those. He did have a strong day or two to finish up minicamp, but a large part of what's been going on definitely still feels like he's behind the 8 ball. There's, you know, he's a guy that I know Damian Woody is still high on from a tools perspective and what he could be. I'm perfectly fine with the setup, right? Tyron Smith is going to mentor Olu. Morgan Moses is going to mentor Carter. Neither one of those guys, well, I shouldn't say neither. Carter Warren is the guy you expect to essentially never really have to see the field. He's the emergency, swing tackle guy. And so you can really see what you have the year after. But don't expect a ton from him in, this 2024 season based on what we've seen and heard so far. And then, of course, Izzy, the guy that has the most explosive ability outside of Breece Hall in that running back room. And he just hasn't seen the fit, right? At this point, this kind of feels like... It kind of feels like it, I don't know, like the DJ Reed situation with Robert Saleh when he was with the, was it the Seahawks or the 49ers? I forget where they had their previous, layover at before. But Izzy Abanikanda is a guy that the traits alone says you should find a way to let him be productive on the field. We're obviously switching our running concepts up a little bit more to include more gap stuff, which isn't his bread and butter, but you should still be able to utilize just what his natural athleticism means, and he just hasn't found a way to find favor with this coaching staff at all. Couldn't see the field last year when there was really no acceptable options outside of Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook failing. We kept I forget the UDF. We kept Valladay, right, on the practice squad, and we didn't really call on anybody else. So you couldn't see the field last year. This offseason, he's continuously been demoted, never got first-string reps, ended up losing a lot of his second-string reps to the Braelon Allen, Isaiah Davis combination. Then we bring in Tariq Cohen. You get jumped immediately by him, and so now you're essentially relegated to third string with quarterback Peasley and whoever we're rolling out there. So it's just not a good look. There hasn't been anything that he can lean on to let the coaching staff say, well, let's find a way to keep him on the field for this. So we'll see if he finds a way to bounce back, but it feels like the writing's on the wall for him. But all in all, much longer video than I expected. Let me know what you guys think, though. Who has stood out the most to you guys, or who on this list should have been called out for, some terrible performances that you've seen coming out of OTAs and minicamp. And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.